guys, I hope you're safe. Every week my hair gets a little bit more out of control and I get a little bit more claustrophobic. But I have plenty of time on my hands to think about why we're all staying home. As the COVID-19 pandemic rages around the world, and around me personally, I've gotten to wondering whether there are lessons that COVID could offer. What are the most important things we can learn from this pandemic? This is April 19th, 2020, and some of what I say here may be outdated in a short time. And by the way, if you'd rather not hear a litany of takeaways about COVID-19 and you want to just skip to the main point, just go here. Part of what's hard about assessing the lessons or meaning of COVID-19 is that we're right in the middle of it. We need to focus now primarily on how to manage it and even how to survive it. Without the clarity of hindsight, this is a first shot in the early days of reflection. I'm sure there are vast areas I'm leaving out or haven't thought of. To me, there's one big lesson that rises above all the others, and that's where I'm headed. But there are a few other things that occur to me. So before I get to the take-home point, let me run through a few other things. They're not new, but the pandemic has definitely highlighted them. Preparedness. We need to be prepared in all sorts of ways. Stockpiling supplies, PPE, the ability to obtain or manufacture medicines and equipment that are essential, a lack of surge capacity in healthcare, limited access to healthcare, how to finance public health preparedness when life and survival potentially hang in the balance. In general, COVID-19 exposes the need for a new attitude toward preparedness across many domains, and we will have to decide how to deal with this. What else? The recognition that emerging viruses differentially affect the poor people, poor countries, those who have fewer choices and lack the options that those with more money have. And at the same time, everyone is affected by any condition, poverty for example, that promotes the spread of viral illness or limits its control. I shudder to think about what may be happening on the ground over the next few weeks in places like India, Latin America, or Sub-Saharan Africa. COVID shows us that we need to pay special attention to vulnerable populations, like the homeless or people in nursing homes, when a pandemic strikes. And of course, science. We need scientists, researchers, medical experts, because no one else is going to produce the medicines, the vaccines, and just the understanding of the virus that we need in a crisis like this. Information is absolutely crucial in infectious disease, so people know how to protect themselves. And they have to believe that the information they're getting is credible so that they will take it seriously. Leadership is crucial. The decision-making of leaders is crucial. Institutions that protect the public health are crucial. Global coordination is crucial. Viruses do not respect borders. We may find that countries in which it's easier to get public health buy-in, like in East Asia for example, may fare better in pandemics. Someone is always blamed for a pandemic. People want an explanation for an unprecedented crisis. And maybe the notion of inadvertent spread from an animal host to a human being lacks a certain immediacy and emotional resonance. Whether it was the Jews in the Black Death of the Middle Ages, or those in Spain or Hong Kong stigmatized by the flus of those names. And incidentally, by that method of naming infectious diseases for their places of origin, the 1918-1919 flu pandemic, known as the Spanish flu, should really be called the U.S. flu, or the Kansas flu, as the first known cases were found in Haskell County, Kansas, highlighting again the collective blame that such names unfairly confer. Anyway, there are always scapegoats to blame for the spread of a pandemic, whether it's China or the World Health Organization or one's political opponents. And to be quite direct about it, and this is the most unabashedly political I'm going to get about this pandemic, it is a disgrace to see people of Asian origin, especially in the United States, subject to blame and racism in the wake of this viral illness. A few potential positives. People are wondering whether the simplification of life under conditions of isolation may shake up our priorities, clarifying what's really important and necessary, maybe even suggesting that consumerism and acquisitiveness and materialism may get reconfigured by this. Is that possible? We'll see. I'd like to think so, but that may be a stretch. Pollution mitigation, carbon emissions, hope for steps to deal with global warming. The fact that carbon emissions have diminished during this period, a direct demonstration of the reduction of atmospheric pollutions by human action, and in some of the most polluted air on the planet, gives potential hope for unified action to continue those positive changes. And what about the future of education and work? Do we learn something useful about remote work and learning that may lead to different options going forward? Getting toward the bigger stuff now. What else? Recurring lesson taught repeatedly after every outbreak. Early intervention, when it makes the most difference, always looks overreactive, uncalled for, and rash. And I don't know who first used this metaphor, but waiting until a viral pandemic hits to respond, which was the prevalent method around the world, especially in the West, is like hearing all the smoke alarms going off in your house, but waiting until the house is on fire to call the fire department. East Asia reacted faster, but did Europe really believe there was something different about Italians since Italy was affected first? And now Spain has more total cases than Italy has? Did Italy somehow think that Iranians were different than Italians? Did the US believe that oceans would protect them from a virus that travels on airplanes? The US shut travel first from China, but the idea cannot be that the virus only travels east from China and not west from Europe. And at this moment, it looks like the virus reached the United States from both Asia and Europe. Okay, note to world. Take emerging viruses seriously, wherever and whenever they occur. Never underestimate new viruses which are unpredictable entities which we never understand until after they kill. Have you heard the line, the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is the virus? That idea, stated by Nobel Prize winning molecular biologist Joshua Lederberg, has resonated with me for decades. It's probably the most famous line in virology. The single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is the virus. God, do I wish that COVID-19 were more like Ebola. Yes, some 60 to 70% of people infected with Ebola will die without modern medical intervention. And we finally have 2 vaccines being used under the compassionate use protocol for the continuing but thankfully waning Eastern Congo Ebola outbreak, and others are in the pipeline. But Ebola spreads by direct contact with blood and bodily fluids of infected individuals, not by casual contact, not by aerosols, not by asymptomatic individuals. But unfortunately, COVID-19 is easily spread by close proximity to infected people, many of whom may not even know they're sick. It has been a worldwide disease of families sharing a living space. So this is not the last epidemic. This is something different. So let's get into the biggest takeaway for me about the coronavirus on a larger scale. I grew up during the Cold War. The threat of nuclear war felt ever present. But global nuclear war, a conflict between nuclear powers, was the product of an enormous military technological industry. And while the threat of nuclear war continues, as the Cold War was ending, people began to confront a situation new to the world. Throughout most of human history, a motivated killer could eliminate a few dozen people with a blade or a blunt object, and later more with bullets or bombs. But suddenly humankind was faced with a new situation. Technology had amplified the destructive potential of an erratic or fanatical human being on a massive scale. A small group of people might be able to get hold of a small nuclear device or a chemical weapon that could do tremendous harm to a population. Or perhaps more worrisome, a single motivated individual with some biological and virology training could theoretically design a bioweapon so lethal and so effective that that one person might have the ability to wipe out a significant segment of humanity, effectively ending human civilization. If that scenario terrifies you, and it does terrify me, consider that scenario happening not because of the malevolent sociopathy of a fanatic, but by a single casual individual, a random person who unknowingly interacts with the unintentional evolution and biological action of a small piece of RNA surrounded in a lipid envelope with a bit of protein, mindless, dispassionate, and caring nothing for the outcome. Because that is the situation in which we now find ourselves, not held hostage to a deranged scientist, but facing a threat equally grave. We have had pandemics since the dawn of civilization. But stop for a moment and consider this planet, occupied not by the Paleolithic small bands of hunter-gatherers with fleeting interactions with strangers, nor by equestrian warriors on the steppes of Asia, nor by the ships that helped deliver the Black Plague from Asia to the shores of Europe, and not by the trains and boats that carried the influenza virus of the 1918-1919 influenza pandemic on its inexorable but relatively slow journey around the world. But rather, we now live on a planet of almost 8 billion human beings. 8 billion human beings and modern airplanes that offer viruses a free ride in the bodies of human beings within hours or days or weeks. On Earth today we have a unique situation in which a single individual in a remote part of the world, or most any part of the world, can have an interaction that leads to an infection with a novel virus, and within weeks every other person on the planet is affected in one way or another. This happens infrequently, but not never. We've had many epidemics and pandemics in history, and we will have more. Just in the last 2 decades, we've had SARS, we've had the 2009 H1N1 influenza pandemic, we've had Ebola, and now we have COVID-19. And thankfully, this pandemic, COVID-19, kills a percentage of the infected in the single digits. That's just dumb luck. There's no particular reason that the virus that struck now didn't kill 60% of its victims or 99% of its victims. We know that more pandemics will emerge. We just don't know the details. And maybe there isn't a virus that will kill 100% of all the infected. Is there a virus yet to emerge that spreads and kills and leaves alive a rump population of survivors to grieve over the lost human species? That virus may yet be in our future. And none of this is new or radical. And I'm not suggesting that this is a transformative moment in human history. But I am pointing out that Dr. Lederberg's message was not being taken seriously enough. What I am suggesting are not remedies, but rather that we need a change in consciousness when it comes to the existential risks the 8 billion of us face in an ecologically and biologically stressed world. So the best thing about COVID-19 for me would be if it served as a wake-up call for humanity. A wake-up call we shouldn't have needed, but evidently did. What I hope is that we will recognize both our loss and our good fortune. That we will see that as bad as this is, as many deaths as it causes, as much loss and grief, as much economic devastation, that we will see in a larger sense our good luck, that we survived. Not all of us, sadly, but human civilization survived. That wasn't preordained. COVID-19 can be seen as a warning we receive from the planet before something much worse hits us. A warning that we can choose to heed, to pay attention to protect ourselves from whatever comes next. Stay safe. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you again soon.